Hi, I'm Hannah, and this is Crusty Cravings. Welcome back to another video. Thanks for tuning in. Today, let's talk starter health, maintenance, feedings, and discard. Today, I have a little helper with me.
Here.
What's your name?
Leo.
This is Leo. He's going to help me feed my starter today. Let's talk feedings. What is a feeding? So a sourdough starter is really nice in the fact that it multiplies every time you feed it. You're never going to run out of it. You just need to continue to feed it in a certain pattern. Some bakers like to feed their starters every 12 to 24 hours. Those bakers probably make sourdough or some form of sourdough on a daily basis. I am not a professional baker and I'm not making sourdough every day of the week. So for me, it makes sense to have a very low maintenance starter. What that means is I feed my starter every week to 1 month. And my starter, when I'm not actively working with it, lives in the refrigerator. I know some people would consider that bad advice and would tell you to feed your starter every day and let it live on the counter. That creates a lot of discard. I think it's very wasteful. I don't think it doesn't work for me and my family. So what I would opt into is just having a very low maintenance starter that lives in the refrigerator. I get it out, I let it come to room temperature. Sometimes I feed it when it's still cold. Stir it, let it double or even triple in size, use what I need to, and refeed it, put it back in the refrigerator. That is my routine. Some bakers, they just let it sit on the counter, give it their feeding, discard the rest in a separate container, and just let it live on the counter. Again, I don't think that works for my family, so I'm not going to do that. I actually went an entire month and a half without feeding my starter. I was postpartum with my newborn and just didn't want to bake at all. I didn't want to bake. I had no energy and I just let it live in my refrigerator for that whole time. I got it out, fed it, doubled in size, and has been making great bread. So you can do it. It can be low maintenance if you want it to be. You can feed it as little or as much as you want to. So if you're letting your starter live on the counter, you will need to feed it every 12 to 24 hours. The reason being is that it starts to get super hungry, very acidic, it smells like acetone, and it could start to develop mold, mildew. It could have what they call Hooch or Kahm yeast. It's not good to leave your starter sitting on the counter for long periods of time hungry. You'll start to see some weird activity with it. If you're letting it sit on the counter and you're feeding it every 12 to 24 hours, make sure you have a loose towel on it or a coffee filter, because if you're putting a tight lid on it for a long period of time, it can start to generate Kahm yeast if it's on the counter. If it's sealed in the refrigerator, the only issue that you may see without feeding it for long periods of time is Hooch. And that is just like a liquidy, almost like a black top sometimes, like a thin layer of like a liquidy, black looking, gray looking liquid that you can pour off. If you have it living in the refrigerator, you do want to cover it or seal it because it will start to create a hardened layer on the top and possibly grow mold if you're keeping it in the refrigerator for a month or two without feeding it. So I always seal mine if it's in the refrigerator. If it's out, like I said, and you're actively feeding it, you just cover it with a very loose cover because the environment is going to play a part in keeping that starter healthy. And you won't run the risk of like bacteria, mold, all of those things if you are consistently feeding it every 12 to 24 hours when it's out. Like I said, when you neglect it and it's sitting out on the counter, that's just like a perfect storm or a perfect environment for bacteria, mold, and different like harmful pathogens to start growing in it. But as long as you're maintaining your starter correctly, you'll be fine. Today, I wanted to show you what discard is, show you the step-by-step process of how I feed my starter. I know it can be a little confusing, but discard is essentially the starter that you are not going to be carrying over to the next feed. Usually you'll only need a certain percentage of your starter. So in this case, this is lazerized. I just need a very small percentage of this for my feed. I will feed it and let it rise, double in size, and then the rest of this is just gonna be discard. I don't need it. I can make recipes with it. I can make crackers with it, biscuits, pancakes, things of that nature, but I don't need all of this for my next feed, so it will be called discard, essentially. Another thing, everybody feeds their starter with a different ratio. I personally have always done a 1:1:2 ratio. So it's 1 part starter, 1 part water, and 2 parts flour. The reason being is it will be a thicker, healthier starter that essentially takes 2 to 4 hours to double in size, but it will stay at its peak for a lot longer, so I have a longer window to use it to bake with. A lot of people will do a 1:1:1 ratio, or a 1:5:5 ratio, or a 1:10:10 ratio. If you're feeding, how are you putting your foot up there? If you're feeding it with a 1:10:10 ratio or a 1:5:5 ratio, usually it takes a little bit longer for it to reach its peak. It could take anywhere from 6 to 12 hours. A lot of people prefer that because they can feed it before they go to bed, and then when they wake up in the morning, it'll be ready to bake with. I've always been able to use it within that 4-hour time frame, so it's never been an issue for me to feed it 1:1:2. Experiment though. Everybody's environment is a lot different. You have heat being a factor, the humidity being a factor, elevation being a many different things can be a factor. So experiment, see what works best for you, and just continue to do what works best. So today I'm going to feed my starter, and Leo's going to be my helper. We're going to do a 1:1:1 ratio just to experiment, and I'm going to make bread with it later. So we have a different glass jar just as an example, so I can show you how we actually discard. And then we'll add some water and some flour to it, and that will be a feed. I have a food scale. I think it's very helpful to use a food scale because you don't use as many measuring cups, you make less of a mess. It's just easier to clean up and do it that way. So essentially I'll zero this out to 0 grams, so it does not take this into account. And then we will put about, I'm gonna try 100 grams of my lazerized starter, and then we'll go from there.
I will help you.
Let's see how many grams that is. Okay, that's about 83.
85.
And okay, put a little bit of flour into this. We're gonna take like 1 big scoop, and then when I tell you to stop, you're gonna stop, okay? So do the scoop. Oh. Okay, so that's 15. Okay, 29. Hey. Hey! All right. Good job. Keep going. That's about 50. We want 100. All right, so 67, 82. 1 more scoop and we should be done. All right. Great, that's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, and then I'll tell you when to stop, okay? So go super slow. Okay, honey. Perfect. All right, so we're gonna mix it. Enzo. All right, you gotta mix it really good, okay? Keep going.
make oatmeal.
Yeah, Jessica. And I got my makeup done today for somebody who is teaching another person how to do makeup. She's teaching a class. So I don't normally look like this. My eyelashes don't normally look like this.
Yeah.
But I use this as an excuse to make a video. Great, good job. And then a lot of people, they just put a rubber band on the jar, the container, like where the feed line was, so that you can see when it actually doubles and when you're able to use it. And then you'll just put something very light on the top of this, like a coffee filter or a really thin cloth, because you don't want dust and things to get into it. You don't want bugs to get into it, but you need it to breathe. You need the oxygen and the environmental factors that play into the way that your starter will grow. You need those things. You need the humidity and the environment to help with it. So my house is set at like 76 degrees. Normally it takes about between like 3 to 4 hours for this to double in size and me to be able to bake with it. So just come back. I'll show you once it has doubled in size. This will double. We'll use what we need, and there will be a little bit left that we can feed. It'll double again, and then you can choose to put it on the counter and feed it every 12 to 24 hours, or you can put it in your refrigerator, let it sit there, and feed it every week to a month. One thing that's super nice about Starter is it's super forgiving. I asked my friends on Instagram how often they feed their starter, and a lot of people said every week, some people said every month, and some people said every 12 to 24 hours. Everybody does it differently. I'm also in a support group on Facebook for sourdough, and those people sometimes bake with their unfed starter out of the refrigerator. Some people bake all the time, so they're feeding it every 12 to 24 hours on the counter. And some people are like me, and they're sometimes super frequent bakers and then sometimes go for a couple months without baking. But starter is so forgiving. If you have a healthy starter and you're maintaining it very well, you're going to be able to pick up the pace on feeding it more often, or you can just step back for a little bit and not feed it as often, and it will bounce back. It'll continue to bake great bread. Just do what works for you and your schedule. Don't feel like you have to feed your starter every day. Like, that's just creating a lot of discard. And if you're not eating bread for every single meal, it's just not sustainable. It's very wasteful. So, just do what works for you, bottom line. Experiment. Your environment is going to be unique for you, and there's so many factors that play into good sourdough baking within your environment. So yeah, bottom line, do what works for you. I've done a month, I've done a week, and I've also gone 5 weeks of freezing it before, and it's come back to life, and it continues to make great bread and baked goods. So do what works for you. Don't be a slave to your starter, and just happy baking. I hope that everything you've learned in this video, you can implement it and enjoy baking sourdough. All right, I fed my starter 4 hours ago, and now it has doubled in size. I can tell it's like hit the peak because it's starting to come down a little bit. So time to bake. Notice like a few bubbles just popping here and there. So super healthy, very active. Definitely ready to bake with. An idiot, and to feed your starter every day.
Don't say an idiot.
And
making it longer.
I know, just tranquilo. You're
making it more.
So many different things. You want to pour it for me?
Yeah.
Wait.
I want to pour the water.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea. And again, my starter is kind of thick when it first comes out of the refrigerator, so Alright, Enzo, I'm gonna need you to sit down on the ground. We're never gonna be able to do this. I said to stop. Oh well, we're gonna try to get some of this out without disturbing it too much.
I'll help you mix it. I'm so excited to mix it.
Okay. Or some people like to just stir it in and continue to use it. I would say if you do have it on the counter, like I said, yeah.